Welcome to In Focus with Ejaz Haider. Our top story tonight is about the charge brought by Delhi police against those who were protesting the BJP government's controversial Citizenship Amendment Act. According to Delhi police, those opposed to CAA had hatched a conspiracy to start riots in Delhi to coincide with the visit to India of US President Donald Trump. This, according to Delhi police, was done to deliberately defame India and malign the current government of Bharatiya Janata Party, a right-wing party which propagates a Hindu supremacist agenda. In fact, the police report stretches the idea of a conspiracy back to the 2019 elections. As reported by the Indian media, the police report says, and I'm quoting from that, from the day that the results of the 2019 parliamentary elections were declared, the tone and tenor of the public utterances of the key conspirators of the present case has shown a clear streak of affinity towards violence, which had started playing out in their minds, unquote. Perish the thought that this fantastic scenario seems to be playing out in the minds of police investigators. To put things in a perspective, an Amnesty International report last month says the Indian police committed serious human rights violations during deadly religious riots in Delhi earlier this year. A BBC report on the Amnesty report says the Amnesty report corroborates independent findings by the BBC into the conduct of Delhi police. Yet, it seems that Delhi police has already decided to arrest and arraign the protesters rather than the perpetrators of the February riots in Delhi. The three-day rioting left over 50 people dead and at least 200 injured. Millions worth of property was also destroyed. To discuss this further, we are joined by Mr. Rajiv Desai, who's an analyst, writes about cities and other public issues, and Mr. Ravi Srivastav also keeps a very close watch on political issues and joins me from Mumbai. Before I get to my panelists, and this is something that I'm quoting from one of the Indian publications, it says in multiple charge sheets relating to the riots, Delhi police have claimed that the violence was part of a well-planned conspiracy to defame Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government and was hashed by those who organized the protests against the amended Citizenship Act. So it seems that Delhi police already has a certain kind of framework in and through which it is looking at the issue. So let me pull in Mr. Srivastav here. Mr. Srivastav, before I get to any specific questions, I want your reading on this.
This was a very unfortunate incident in Delhi. In fact, I hope you know that Delhi state does not have the police under their control, and the Delhi police directly reports to the Minister of Home of India, Mr. Amit Shah. And what you have just now stated is my opinion, my thinking is it is on the contrary. Because in the riots which lasted for nearly 72 hours in Delhi, had 53 people killed and millions worth of property destroyed. The perpetrators of this riot was the right-wingers. The people belonging to Bharatiya Janata Party were the main conspirators behind it. And Delhi police has filed a 17,500 pages charge sheet. At one time, even the Delhi court had observed that all your findings, almost prove that the police was biased against a particular minority community. So much so that the Anurag Thakur, the minister in the central cabinet of Modi, the Kapil Mishra, a prominent BJP leader, a Pravesh Verma, a member of parliament from Delhi, these three people made very provocative speeches all through, and they were standing with the police shoulder to shoulder. It was visible. There are videos available for that. They destroyed a mosque by, going top of it, and so much of violence was seen on the streets of Delhi. It appeared as if it's not a capital of the country, but any, interland city or something like that. There were no attempts made to stop that violence, and for 72 hours, Delhi witnessed, the worst kind of a riot in their, lifetimes. So I will say that it was not perpetrated by the people for last 15 months or 17 months. What the report says, in fact, it was done by the right-wingers, and they had planned it and they had executed it. Particularly the shops of the minority community, the people of the minority community were mercilessly beaten and killed. It's a fact that majority community also, some people were lost their lives, but that, it was almost a kind of a support to the right-wingers by the Delhi police during these riots. Yeah.
Right. As I said, before I get to any specific questions, let me pull in Mr. Desai also and get Mr. Desai's reading, and then we'll get down to some specific questions because I want to get a sense of what's going on. Mr. Desai.
Well, it's almost sort of impossible to discuss factual and other details of all of this and what the police in Delhi have done. Suffice it to say that Mr. Srivastav has got pretty much the right perspective on it, because it's a joke, literally a joke. I'll tell you, for example, what they're actually doing. One of the things that happened because of these arrests or these charges and all filed against these activists, a former policeman, very high-profile policeman called Julio Ribeiro, wrote a letter and publicized it, saying that this is very, very unfair and it's not proper. So instead of trying to set the thing right, they organized another 20, 30 retired police officials to write a letter to contradict Mr. Ribeiro. So this is not governance. This is just play acting. And the fact of the matter is that the Delhi police report to the Indian main government of India Home Ministry. So the Home Minister is actually ill. He was reported to have contracted the virus. He entered a private hospital. He was discharged from there, and a day later he entered the government hospital, and he's been there for a while, I think 3 times, and now he's back home. So I always thought that these people had an agenda, which they do, but they don't know how to implement it. So it's left up to the bureaucrats. So if you want to try and understand what's happening on these Delhi police charge sheets of whatever 17,000 pages, the fact is that it's the bureaucrats who are running the show in India, and the political leadership is. I have no idea what they do. I don't even understand. I don't even know if they understand the provisions of the Indian Penal Code, the provisions of the Indian Constitution, etc., etc., etc. So it's the whole thing's become a bit of a joke. So when you get in a situation like this, to discuss facts about the charge sheet and the charges and stuff, it's all a joke. The point is this is a government that's absolutely without any direction, without any sense of appropriateness, and anybody does whatever they want. I mean, if some bureaucrat decides that they want to do something with China, they do it. If some says that we are going to do something with Sri Lanka, they do that. I think the whole world ought to pray for us.
Okay, let me take this back to Mr. Srivastav. Mr. Srivastav, Mr. Desai seems to be suggesting that the political government is directionless, the bureaucrats are running the show, but the sense that gets conveyed is that far from being directionless, this particular political government has a right-wing agenda. It has made use of the government machinery, the bureaucracy, both civil and military, in whatever it has wanted to do. And as a matter of fact, just like in Delhi, Some analysts have also suggested that this is like the Gujarat model. When Mr. Modi was the chief minister of Gujarat and when there was a pogrom and over 2,000 Muslims were killed, the police in Gujarat actually helped the rioters. So give me your sense of whether this government is directionless and it's just a bureaucracy, or whether this government is actually directing the bureaucracy to do what it wants them to do.
Actually, you rightly use the word that has now been publicized across the country, which is called a Gujarat model. Its Gujarat model is not about any development or not about any progress or prosperity in the state. It is about how the majoritism can prevail over the minority anywhere. This is what they practice it. And as far as you said, that they keep everybody under their thumb, whether it is bureaucracy, whether it is police, whether it is administration, who name the person you call it, they will keep them under their thumb and they will make them do what actually they say. I recall clearly, in India what is happening is the government has got media also along with them. Some 70-80% of the national channels in India, they have no other job but to do only publicity of Mr. Modi and some of his ministers, some of their actions, some of their decisions, some of their policies. They have only that job. Their channels are there. The media, some channels they have kept in their pocket, and they are precisely doing this job. So much so, I'll give you an example from Delhi riots only as us. There is a man arrested. He was a Aam Aadmi Party councillor. His name is Tahir Hussain. Tahir Hussain made frantic calls to the police when his house was attacked. And the media guys, the reporters, they went to his rooftop and they were picking up the things like this is a petrol bomb, or this is an arm, this is an ammunition, this is that. There were no forensics. There were no investigation. I don't know what police did it for so many months before filing the charge sheet. The reporter, the media guy, was picking up everything and showing on the camera. So much so, when this kind of carelessness and a deliberate and a purposeful attempt to frame someone, they were using the media also for that purpose. So not alone the bureaucracy, the police, the government, they are using practically everyone for this. They are setting up their own goal.
I'm happy you mentioned this case. There's also the case within this whole thing of Omar Khalid. And again, quoting from one of the Indian publications, one FIR even claims that Khalid had met other accused people on January 8 and told them to prepare for quote-unquote something big / riots for when US President Donald Trump visited India. However, the government announced that visit more than a month later on February 11. So it seems that there is a deliberate attempt to sort of create a situation where the victims are presented as perpetrators and the perpetrators are going scot-free.
You are absolutely right, Ejaz. This is not only one. The Omar Khalid has been arrested now. There was a lady, Safura Zargar, who was arrested. She was a pregnant lady, and for three or 4 months, she was kept in the jail under very, very inhuman conditions. There are many people who have been arrested in Delhi just by framing the charges against them. I know for sure that those such charges will not stand a scrutiny of law ultimately when the matter goes to the trial level. But as of now, their machinery is working full time to frame people and to keep them under their prisons and take them inside. And this was all for that CAA, NCR, and all those policies which government decided. They will go for a national register, they'll go for the Amendment Act and all those things which they passed in the parliament. But the fact is that implementation is nowhere to be seen, because there is so much of resistance across the country for those things that they are not able to implement anything out of that. So this is what.
Before I wrap up, let me go back to Mr. Desai here. Mr. Desai, so here's the situation. Whichever way we want to cut it, frankly, it seems to suggest that unfortunately for discerning, educated Indian citizens like yourself, it's a major concern because it's a slippery slope. And once you begin to slide down this, then there's no stopping it.
Well, I just want to say that I agree with what Mr. Srivastav said, and I agree that with almost everything he said. I have said that also on your broadcast in the past. What I'm saying is that we may be in a more dangerous situation than anybody thinks, because while trying to, you see, they are unable to handle this coronavirus issue. They are in a state of war against China. They've been beaten up very badly with China. The economy has crashed. So they only know how to divert the agenda. And by doing silly things, by doing things like this, I mean, it's not silly by any manner or means to put people in jail, but to do things that are not relevant to the agenda of governance. So the police report, the whole issue of the virus statistics, which are being fudged, all of this that they're doing in order, because now there's going to be elections, so in order to keep the heat off of them and focus on other marginal, please don't misunderstand, by marginal I don't mean insignificant, but not the main governance agenda. So they are not able to deliver on that, so they keep diverting everything. And this is where the danger is, that the bureaucrats will run amok, as they have. We've known this happen in the past, and then we'll suddenly find ourselves in a very serious situation, as we did in fact with China, as we are in fact facing with the public health emergency and with the economy. So these people have an agenda which is a majoritarian agenda, agreed. They do not have the capacity, ability, learning, education to do anything besides just generally create havoc everywhere. And this is what the danger is. This is somewhat like what happened in Germany and Italy in the early part of the 20th century, in the first half of the 20th century. That they all lost control.
There have been references to the fascist and sort of Nazi tendencies of this particular right wing. But thank you so much, Mr. Desai. Thank you also to Mr. Srivastav for speaking with us. We shall take a short break and return to revisit the situation in Indian occupied and illegally annexed Kashmir. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Focus. Our second story tonight is about the continued Indian oppression in occupied and illegally annexed Kashmir. Last Thursday, hundreds of angry residents clashed with Indian occupation forces in Srinagar after 3 Kashmiri men and a woman were killed in a gunfight. According to reports, occupation forces surrounded the Batamalu neighborhood of Srinagar after midnight following a tip-off that Kashmiri freedom fighters were hiding in a house. In the exchange of fire, 3 Kashmiri men and a woman were killed. It is important to note that in a long line of extrajudicial killings and fake encounters, there have been at least 2 incidents in recent months where occupation forces claim to have killed freedom fighters. Investigations proved those claims to be false. Also important to note is the fact that after the illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir on 5th August 2019, India's right-wing Prime Minister Narendra Modi had talked about how his government's patently illegal action would transform occupied Kashmir. Instead, his government had since destroyed Kashmir's economy, brought daily life to a halt, deprived Kashmiris of basic services, arrested thousands of Kashmiris, and subjected Kashmir to a year-long lockdown. To discuss the situation further, we are joined by Mr. Rafiq Kathwari. Mr. Kathwari is an activist, influencer, and a poet, and the only non-Irish poet to have won the Patrick Kavanagh Award. He joins me from New York. I also have with me Gowhar Geelani, who is a journalist and author of Kashmir, Rage and Reason, who joins me from Srinagar. Mr. Kathwari, thank you again for being on the program. As I said, it's a privilege. I just opened your book. When my team told me that you're going to be on the panel, I was very happy, and so I was looking through your book in another country, and I came across the poem of the same title which you wrote for Agha Shahid Ali, the late Agha Shahid Ali. And I was deeply moved. And, when you say in Kashmir, half asleep, mother listens to the rain. In Manhattan, I feel a presence in the rain. Now, I wanted to start with this for a reason. Because most of the times we're talking about realpolitik, we're talking about geopolitics, we're looking at people as statistics, India-Pakistan rivalry and the rest of it. But there is a human, level at which we are not normally looking at the situation. So I really want to get your sense of how you look at the situation ever since this illegal annexation happened last year.
Thanks for having me, Ejaz. The illegal occupation didn't happen last year. It happened in 1948.
I said illegal annexation. So I just wanted to make that clear. Of course, the illegal occupation goes back to 47.
It's been illegal from the 1948, 1947. It was Nehru who annexed it before Modi did anything else. So that's one thing I want to put into perspective. This is not, of course, something that I'm countering. You're right. The annexation is illegal. However, what I want to point out, and thanks for reading my book, and I have another one coming up. It's called My Mother's Scribe. It's published by Yoda Press in New Delhi. It should be available next month. And it consists of letters to the prime ministers of the world by my mother, which I transcribed, and it should make interesting reading. Now, after that plug, what I want to talk about is, of course, the Gowhar will talk about it more in detail because he's on the spot about what's happening to journalism, to the free press in Kashmir. What I want to emphasize is that India is at the moment a unscientific and undemocratic mess. These are words used by Salah Rashid. But you have to understand that we are not too far away from India becoming a Hindu republic, or as they want to call it, a Hindu Rashtra. And this is all, the parliament is there only for a name. Yesterday, just last week, they really gave up on any democratic rule when they were discussing the farm bill. So all these things that they have been talking about, love jihad, zameen jihad, ghar wapsi, is all basically centered around Kashmir, because Kashmir strikes at the heart of Akhund Bharat, which is their idea of a prehistoric India stretching from Afghanistan to Myanmar. And in some maps I've seen, or the orange color extends to Southeast Asia. What is important for us to remember is that there are 250 million Muslims in India. So declaring India a Hindu Rashtra presents an incredible situation here. Where will those Muslims go? What will they do? When will they rise up? So you have something in the making here that I can't even imagine at the moment.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Kathwari, for that. Stay with me. Let me go to Gowhar, Geelani. But before I say that, since I mentioned in my opening, there was a speech made by Narendra Modi in which he promised the moon to the Kashmiris. And I have this in front of me, and this is an analysis put out by an Indian, which says Jammu and Kashmir was one of the better performing states in India, with a booming economy that ranked second highest on non-tax revenue and third highest on the tax revenue list. It was among the top 3 special category states for low fiscal deficit and top 10 for its low poverty rate of 10.35% against the national average of 21.92%. The state's per capita gross state domestic product had risen to 100,000 Indian rupees, and so on. And then it goes on to say by the summer of 2019, things were shaping up well for the people. The construction work was going on, and then came August. And the world of all Kashmiris came crashing down. So, Mr. Geelani, give us a sense of, I keep revisiting the situation in Kashmir. So give us the latest situation on the ground. You were promised the moon. Have you got it?
I remember once the former Prime Minister of India, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, once came to Kashmir. It was early 2000. And I just began, I was a university student and I was studying journalism. So at that time, he had also sold dreams to the people of Kashmir. And I remember one of the catchy headlines at that point in time, which read, Vajpayee sells dreams and images in his eyes. So it was the time when he had promised that, the issue of Kashmir, the dispute of Kashmir will be resolved not under the ambit of Indian constitution, but under the ambit of humanism or mankind, insaniyat ke daire mein baat hogi. Before that, you also know that another former Prime Minister, Mr. Narasimha Rao, had referred to sky is the limit phrase. So, this is going on since last 7 decades, as Mr. Kathwari, put things in perspective in the beginning. But I just want to tell you that right now, the most important thing and what people of Kashmir, people of Jammu and Kashmir and the valleys of Pir Panjal and Chenab Valley are feeling is the dignity of death, dignity of the dead. People who are killed in militancy-related violence or, in crossfire, civilians who are being killed. So even their bodies are not being given to the families. They're not being returned to the families. The families are, their right to mourn is snatched. So in one of the novelists of Kashmir described the state of India as a body snatcher, official body snatcher. And a Telegraph ran a story which said that, people are describing this, practice as, the state is behaving as a last chore, somebody who snatches, bodies. So that process also began in 1984 when Maqbool Bhatt, the co-founder of JKLF, was hanged in Tihar jail, and his mortal remains were not returned to Kashmir. And then Afzal Guru, in early 2013. So that is, right now since March, when the COVID pandemic hit the world and also Kashmir, this practice has been going on where anyone, even including a 14-year-old specially challenged person who was hearing impaired, his body was not returned to the family was not allowed to bury the body in the ancestral graveyard. Another alleged custody killing which happened recently in North Kashmir Sopore town of Irfan Ahmad Dar, who was a 23-year-old shopkeeper who was taken from his shop, and then the police said that he died in custody in mysterious circumstances. They said that he took advantage of the dark. The routine story, the script is already there. And we had similar stories where women have been killed and where innocent, civilians have been killed in gun battles. So that is the most pressing situation, most pressing issues right now in Kashmir, that people are not being allowed to mourn, and the bodies of the dead are being snatched. So that's one aspect. Second is, if we talk about journalism, yesterday one of our colleagues, who happens to be the executive member of the press club, he ran a story 2 days back about the cyberbullying, how a cyber police and Kashmir police were, kind of arresting and detaining and summoning and interrogating normal Kashmiri students who were writing anything, anything political, or anything satire. So their passwords were taken and their phones were confiscated, mobile phones were and the moment this journalist wrote, Aqib Javed wrote this story, then the next day he was summoned, and then he wrote a piece where he was, detained for 6 hours illegally, where he said that he was slapped by the police officers and he was abused. His mother and sister were abused. And he wrote a similar piece in the same Article 14, a news website. So that is, and what has happened since last August. More than 32 journalists have been summoned, and there are cases registered against 10. And, UAPA cases. Kamran Yusuf was in Tihar jail. Asif Sultan is still in jail for last 2 years. So then comes the politics. What is allowed. It was for the first time since last 1 year that even a political party like the PDP was allowed to hold its first ever meeting in Kashmir. So that is the overall sense. It is an atmosphere where views are criminalized, where politics is kind of suspended, where there is no freedom of speech, there is no freedom of expression, and there is no freedom after expression. So on every single marker of normalcy or development, you see what the situation is.
Absolutely. The situation clearly is going from bad to worse. Let me go back to Mr. Kathwari. Mr. Kathwari, since you got the Patrick Kavanagh Award, I was also reading The Great Hunger. Of course, the context is different, but came across a couple of lines that I thought I'll share with you, which one can read in various ways. We'll wait and watch the tragedy to the last curtain, till the last soul passively, like a bag of wet clay, rolls down the side of the hill. So, after hearing Gowhar Geelani, this is obviously a report which tells us that nothing is looking up, frankly, in occupied and illegally annexed Kashmir. What options do you think Kashmiris have? How can friendly states help them? Do they need to reach out to governments? Do they need to reach out to non-governmental organizations, rights bodies, academia, the literati? What are the options here?
It's a very good question. In the diaspora in the United Kingdom, in the United States, are trying to do what they can. The situation, as Gowhar described, is extreme. The Security Council has failed to address India's human rights abuses in Kashmir. So there are, when you have people like Julian Assange, an Australian, jailed in England for exposing American war crimes in Iraq, when the so-called superpowers, great powers, can do that to a journalist who was trying to expose the truth. What hope is there for small regional places? The aftermath, the places like Kashmir, the unresolved geography of the British Empire. What hope do we have when the people that we turn to, there are few, sometimes I wonder if the Battle of Kashmir is being fought in the U.S. Congress. And then there is always this thing about the Israeli model being used in Kashmir. The blindings, of course, are unique to Kashmir. Nowhere else in the world are people being mass blinded as they are in the valley. There are the Gowhar mentioned about the snatching of the bodies. The Israelis are doing that. They're taking away 8-9-year-old young boys and keeping them in jail. And then later on, of course, the bodies in Palestine are a bargaining chip when the Palestinians imprison or take as a prisoner an IDF officer. But in Kashmir, we don't have that sort of thing yet. And you might even see an October quote-unquote surprise with reference to Iran, which will give Donald Trump an edge, hopefully, he thinks. So these are Kashmir cannot be considered in a vacuum. There are contemporary struggles for freedom going on, which we have to link up with. There's so many of them. You have, for instance, the disappeared in Kashmir are linking up with the disappeared in Chile. In fact, there are more disappeared in Kashmir than there are disappeared in Chile. So we have to answer your question, what do we need to do? We have to link up our organization and the civil society led by my friend, what's his name? It escapes me. But he is doing remarkable work. And this is what we have to do. We have to link up with like-minded
Absolutely, Mr. Kathwari. I think that's a very good point that you're making in terms of not just resistance literature, but politically also, and sort of, reaching out laterally to other oppressed people. But thank you so much. That was Mr. Rafiq Kathwari speaking with us. Let me go back to Gowhar Geelani. Mr. Geelani, I was reading Sheikh Ashiq's statement, the president of KCCI, and he says the economy is in a complete mess. And he also said that they have estimated a loss of more than $5 billion in the 10 months of lockdown. So what exactly is the situation of the economy, agriculture, horticulture, other, handicrafts and the traditional sort of cottage industries that Kashmir has?
See, Mr. Ejaz, the Kashmir economy is basically dependent on horticulture. And, people in South Kashmir and North Kashmir, there are, they own these orchards of apples, and there are a lot of handicrafts, and also the tourism industry, which contributes about 6% to the region's GDP. So according to the same, Kashmir Chamber of Commerce and Industries, their estimate was that at least 500,000 people, like 5 lakh Kashmiri boys and girls, lost jobs. And the entrepreneurs, young boys and girls who had invested in their businesses suffered back-to-back losses, first because of the 2008 and 2010 civil uprising, summer agitations, and then 2014 devastating floods. And then Burhan Wani's, in the aftermath of Burhan Wani, again, Kashmir was shut for more than 4-5 months. And then August 5 happened last year. So these, in the last decade, there have been like at least 5-6 seasons which have been lost to the situation on the ground. So that is, and then because there is no tourism, so no foreign tourists or even, tourists from India and other places, Southeast Asia and other countries who used to visit, Kashmir, the houseboats are empty, the shikara walas are empty, and they have not earned for the last 12 months. The hotels are empty. And then the transporters who earn their bread by plying their vehicles and ferrying tourists and the locals. So that business has completely shut. So the estimate was like $55 billion, around 50,000 crores of Indian national rupee. So that is another casualty has been, apart from economy, has been the education of kids. All the school going children, they have been in their homes for the last 12 months, and especially first because of the August 5 thing, what happened last year, and then because of the COVID situation. So that is another casualty. The third thing which I wanted to tell you was one that there's a report by Supriya Sharma, who works with the Scroll. She's one of the editors. And what happened in Delhi when the pogrom happened, among 53 people who were killed, 38 of them were Muslims. And initially, the complaints were against the majority community people who had actually instigated the violence there, including some ministers of the ruling dispensation. But as of now, when you see the people who are in jail and against whom the cases have been registered, they are mostly Muslims. 80% of them are Muslim.
It's interesting. It's interesting, Mr. Ani. Sorry, I had to interject because the first segment of this program was actually about this, and it's really funny the way in which the Delhi police has actually turned victims into perpetrators, and the perpetrators are nowhere to be seen. But please go on.
Yeah, education, economy, and then the entire sense of the dignity to a life of a Kashmiri. That is the most challenging part, as I said in my earlier comment. So right now, be it any expression, whether it is creative expression, creative form of protest, civil society protest, political protest, journalistic writing, normal journalistic writing about facts, everything has been criminalized in Kashmir. So now anyone who writes, even sends out a tweet, it comes at a huge personal risk and personal cost. But what, the question that you asked, Mr. Kathwari, I wanted to respond to that because, it's my considered opinion that all these talks about, countries coming to rescue to Kashmir, to the rescue of Kashmir, I don't believe in this. I knew one person, the late Muzaffar Khadim, who was one of the most optimistic person that I'd ever met. And he said, in the case of Kashmir, as a Muslim, he said that it is a sin to be hopeless. But he said, in the case of Kashmir, I have come to a conclusion that it's a hopeless situation for us. Because on the one hand, it's a geopolitical, it's part of that great game where different powers wrestle with each other and Kashmiris suffer. And on the other hand, people, countries have to do business with India. As I told you earlier, that Germany has to sell Volkswagen and France has to sell Rafale jets. So where does Kashmir figure in that? And US has to contain China. So if you look at all the external and internal factors, these statements by Amnesty International or CPJ or Reporters Without Borders, or some statements from the Pakistani establishment or some rights bodies that do not change the reality on the ground. Right now, the latest government figures are that 23 lakh domicile certificates out of, at least 19 lakh have been issued. So, in some time, we will be a minority in our own land. So these are the concerns that Kashmiris have. If you analyze all the external and internal factors, we think that we have never faced such a existential crisis in our 5,000-old history, the manner in which we are facing it now.
I totally agree with you. This is a lamentable situation. Obviously, it's a situation, but I will say one thing, which is that I still haven't lost hope. There are things that one can always do, perhaps not talk about them overtly, but sure. Thank you so much. That was Mr. Gowhar Geelani speaking with us. This is all from In Focus tonight. We shall see you tomorrow. Keep following our latest updates on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.